When submarines first entered naval service, they carried with them a reputation that was as dark as the depths they dove into. Sailors nicknamed the early years of undersea duty the coffin service, and for good reason. Mechanical failures, design flaws, and tragic accidents claimed hundreds of lives before submarine warfare had even proven itself in battle. By the late 1930s, though, the world's navies were racing toward what they believed was a new era of safe, reliable, and highly effective submarines. But in 1939, one of the worst naval disasters in American history would prove just how fragile that promise still was. This is the story of the USS Squalus, an advanced submarine that became a tomb on the ocean floor, trapping its crew hundreds of feet below the surface, and the desperate rescue mission that followed. What took place remains one of the most daring operations in naval history. Viewer discretion is advised. In the years that bridged the end of World War I and the lead-up to World War II, undersea technology advanced rapidly. Nations realized that dominance at sea would soon depend on what they could achieve beneath the waves. Submarines, once considered experimental and dangerously unreliable, were being refined into formidable machines of war. By the 1920s and 1930s, designers learned how to build vessels that could dive deeper, travel farther, and operate underwater for longer stretches than ever before. For the United States, this meant investing in entire new classes of subs. One of these was the Sargo class, introduced in 1938. These were state-of-the-art boats featuring innovations such as advanced lead-acid batteries designed to withstand battle damage and provide more dependable power. Among this class was the USS Squalus, launched with high hopes and high expectations. On paper, it was one of the most advanced submarines in the world. The vessel could reach depths of 250 feet, make 20 knots on the surface, and travel thousands of miles on a single fueling. Alongside its sister ship, the USS Sculpin, it represented the cutting edge of American naval engineering. The mission envisioned for these subs was clear. In the event of war with Japan, they would sever enemy supply lines across the Pacific, slipping beneath the waves to strike unseen. The Squalus could even perform an emergency dive in under 1 minute, faster than any other submarine at that time. But first, it had to prove itself in trials. And that meant repeated test dives off the coast of New England. The morning of May 23, 1939 began like countless other drills. The Squalus set out from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, carrying 53 officers and enlisted men, along with 2 civilian engineers and a General Motors representative responsible for monitoring its battery system. Rear Admiral Oliver Naquin was in command. Their orders for the day were straightforward: perform a series of dives and resurfacing maneuvers, all close to shore and well within the submarine's design limits. There was no reason to expect anything unusual. Shortly after 9 a.m., the command was given to prepare for a dive. The crew worked quickly to shut down the diesel engines, close the air vents, and switch over to battery power. Admiral Naquin stood in the control room, watching a panel filled with indicator lights. Each green light confirmed a system had been properly secured for diving. When every lamp glowed green, Naquin gave the final order: dive. At first, everything seemed normal. The sub slipped beneath the waves, angling downward, but almost immediately something was wrong. A sailor's panicked voice came across the intercom, shouting for the boat to surface. Despite the lights showing the vents were sealed, one of them had remained wide open. Seawater was rushing into the engine compartment at a terrifying rate. The flooding was unstoppable. Men in the engine spaces fought against the torrent, but the force of the incoming water tilted the submarine downward at a steep angle. Within moments, the Squalus was sliding into a deadly plunge. Admiral Naquin faced an impossible decision. To save the lives of those in the forward compartments, he had to order the watertight doors sealed. Doing so would trap the crew still in the engine room, condemning them. Hesitation meant all hands might be lost. The order was given. The heavy steel doors were shut and locked. Some men managed to scramble through in the final seconds, but many did not. Screams echoed as the last barrier sealed, cutting them off forever. Among the men lost was a sailor whose wedding was only days away, his best friend left behind to live with the memory of closing that door. The submarine continued its uncontrolled descent. Darkness swallowed the crew as the electrical systems failed. To make matters worse, the batteries, partially submerged in seawater, began to smoke and risked exploding. Chief Electrician Lawrence Gaynor, fumbling with a flashlight, crawled into the hazardous compartment to disconnect them. His actions saved the submarine from detonating, though the electrical arc blinded him temporarily and damaged his vision for life. The crew braced for the worst. If the ocean floor was deeper than 250 feet, the Squalus might implode under pressure. The hull groaned as it fell. Then, with a thunderous crash, the submarine struck bottom at 240 feet, barely within its limits. Inside, 33 men remained alive. They were in total darkness, sealed inside an air pocket. Training kept them calm. The Navy drilled its submariners for just this nightmare scenario, trapped on the ocean floor, waiting for help that might never come. The first step was signaling their position. The Squalus released an emergency buoy attached to a cable and set off smoke flares in hopes surface ships would spot them. The buoy also contained a phone line to communicate with rescuers once contact was made. Meanwhile, some men desperately tapped on pipes leading to flooded compartments, hoping for a reply. None came. It became clear that nearly half the crew had perished instantly in the flooding. Admiral Naquin gathered supplies, oxygen tanks, food, blankets, and prepared for a long wait. Based on their air reserves, he estimated they had about 48 hours before suffocation would set in. To stretch this time, he ordered men into different compartments, the healthiest into the colder torpedo room, the rest in the slightly warmer control room. They were given Momsen lungs, early breathing devices meant for emergency escape. But these were rated for shallower depths than where they now sat. Using them might be suicide, so they were kept as a last resort. The submarine grew colder by the hour, condensation turning to ice on the steel walls. Some men managed to sleep, others whistled softly to keep calm. All they could do was wait. The Squalus failed to resurface on schedule. Alarm spread quickly. Its sister ship, the USS Sculpin, was preparing to depart for Panama when it received word. The Sculpin immediately turned back, racing to the coordinates provided. But those coordinates were wrong. Hours ticked by as the crew searched in vain. Only when a lookout spotted a distant flare did they find the true position. The Sculpin approached and located the buoy, confirming survivors were below. Cheers erupted inside the trapped submarine when the sound of another vessel was heard overhead. Through the buoy phone, Admiral Naquin's voice made contact with Captain Wilkins of the Sculpin. Relief surged, until a wave snapped the buoy cable, severing communication. For hours, the Sculpin dragged hooks across the seabed, desperately trying to relocate the submarine. Time was slipping away. When contact was re-established, the survivors below received a coded message, SRC. It meant a submarine rescue chamber was on its way. This experimental device, shaped like an inverted bell, was designed to latch onto a sunken sub's hatch and ferry survivors to the surface. But it had never been used in a real emergency. Fortunately, the Navy's only rescue chamber was already nearby in Connecticut, aboard the USS Falcon. The ship steamed toward the site at top speed, carrying divers trained for one of the most dangerous operations imaginable. By the time it arrived in the early morning hours of May 24th, the men of the Squalus had been entombed for nearly 24 hours. Oxygen was thin, carbon dioxide poisoning was setting in, and many were on the edge of hypothermia. Divers faced peril even before reaching the submarine. At 240 feet, the risk of nitrogen narcosis, disorientation caused by pressure, was severe. One diver slammed into the hull after becoming impaired, but managed to recover and secure the rescue chamber's guide cable. The chamber was lowered carefully and locked onto the hatch. Water drained, and the hatch was opened. For the first time since the accident, survivors saw rescuers standing before them, holding hot coffee and blankets. It was a sight they would never forget. The chamber could only carry 8 men at a time. Naquin organized the order. Those weakest from cold and exhaustion went first. Each trip took over 3 hours. The men waiting below endured excruciating headaches from rising carbon dioxide, struggling to stay conscious between oxygen releases. Trip after trip, more survivors were pulled to safety. Finally, only 10 men remained, including Naquin himself. They entered the chamber for the last journey up. Halfway up, the chamber jammed, cables twisted, threatening to snap. For terrifying minutes, the capsule hung suspended in darkness, spinning violently. Rescuers debated whether to risk continuing. If the main cable parted, everyone inside would be lost. At last, the decision was made to cut the stabilizing cable and haul the chamber up by hand. Inch by inch, over 4 grueling hours, sailors on the Falcon pulled it to the surface. Against all odds, every last survivor emerged alive. After 40 hours trapped at the bottom of the Atlantic, 33 men were saved in one of the most remarkable rescues in naval history. The Squalus, however, still lay on the seabed. The Navy refused to abandon such a valuable new submarine. Over the next 4 months, divers worked tirelessly to raise it, using pontoons and chains in dangerous trial-and-error attempts. More than once, the submarine broke free and sank again, dragging equipment down with it. Finally, on the 5th attempt, the wreck was secured and towed back to port. Inside, 25 bodies were recovered. One was never found. Investigators confirmed what Admiral Naquin had insisted. The accident was caused not by human error, but by a mechanical malfunction in the vent system. Naquin was commended for his leadership, though he credited his crew. He described how men shared blankets, sacrificed comfort, and risked themselves for each other. Chief Electrician Gaynor, whose quick action had prevented an explosion, lived with damaged eyesight but was hailed as a hero. The submarine itself was repaired and recommissioned under a new name, the USS Sailfish. Some survivors returned to serve aboard her, though several later died in World War II. In a twist of fate, the Sailfish eventually sank a Japanese destroyer responsible for sinking the Sculpin, its old sister ship. As for Admiral Naquin, he never commanded a submarine again. He later served as an engineering officer and survived the attack on Pearl Harbor. More than 8 decades later, the saga of the USS Squalus remains one of the Navy's greatest challenges and triumphs. It proved the worth of submarine rescue technology, demonstrated unshakable courage in the face of death, and highlighted the bonds of brotherhood among sailors who endured the unimaginable. The story is still taught in Navy training today as an example of leadership, sacrifice, and the razor-thin line between life and death beneath the sea.